Hi there, my name's Rooster. I'm in my glass blowing shop here today just to do a little demonstration of what we like to do with the gold that we find. After we bring it up out of the ground or out of the river, we bring it back to the glass shop here and we'll use it in projects of glass actually to turn the glass different colors. We get the pink here from the gold and we get also silver. So I'll do a little demonstration of turning the gold into a beautiful piece of art. Now the first thing that we're going to want to do is to heat up this glass rod until it's molten hot, and we're going to pick up that little speck of gold on there, and when it heats up on the piece of hot glass, it's going to turn molten and stick to it. Now, this is a pretty common process that most glass blowers use gold and silver for fuming glass to make different colors. Although I don't know any other glass blowers that are miners that use their own gold that they dig out of the ground to create their art. I don't think I know any miners that are glass blowers either. I don't know, my dad's always taken me out and instilled a love for nature and all of God's creations. We've always gone prospecting as long as I can remember. It's always been a great part of our bonding relationship. A lot of times we don't ever find anything, and it's a great time anyway, just to be out there in God's creation and with my dad, with our friends, and it's good times. I couldn't think of anywhere better to be. Alright, now we've picked up the gold. You can see it here on the piece of glass. I'm not sure if you can see that in the camera there, but anyway, it's starting to turn molten on there. That's the first step here. We're going to set that away for a moment and heat up this little bubble, which we will also heat, and then we'll add the gold to the outside of it. I'll never forget, first time my dad and I found the big nugget. It ended up being almost an ounce. It was 19 pennyweights, and we were down about 12 feet, digging down into the bedrock. And we'd been looking for, well, we'd been digging in that hole for probably over a month, maybe 2 months. It was getting pretty good size, and it was getting really deep and really hard packed. We scanned the metal detector down there, and we heard a little bit of a noise down there, a little bit of a disturbance. And all of a sudden, we kept digging and digging, and it would get louder and louder. And finally, we took out a bunch of extra material and thought we got to be getting down there to it. We pulled out this big square rock and put the detector down in there, and it just overloaded. It sounded like, I don't know, like a like an ambulance going by or something. And my dad goes, "Eureka, that one's mine." He knew it was a big one. And so he dug down in there and he pulled that sucker out of there, and it was a big plate of gold like that big. It was awesome. It was 19 pennyweights. And that was the biggest one of our career to that time, but we've topped it then by more than double now. Alright, now we have a bubble which we can broadcast the gold onto as it turns into a fume in the flame. I'll use a small flame for that. I have to say, one of the coolest things about dredging too is being down in that hole being able to pick up a boulder that's like 4 times the size of anything that you could ever even move on land and pick that sucker up and throw it into the current and watch it just suck downstream like 100 feet, crashing down there, and you can feel the concussion like an earthquake. It's awesome. Seeing all the fish down in there. They love to come in the hole and eat all the stuff when you're digging up the material. I've seen over 20 trout inside of like a 10 by 10 hole, probably, all feeding the stuff off the tailings of the dredge. After a while, they get used to the humans and they just stay in there and they know that you're not going to hurt them. They're just feeding them. They like it. They kind of become tame after a little bit. The gold's starting to coat here. You'll notice that it's getting a little bit of a pink tinge to it. I don't know if you can see the gold on here. It's molten right now. I remember another time my dad and I were down, I believe we were at the Klamath River up in Northern California. And we were probably down about 20 feet underwater. The current was pretty good, and all of a sudden I couldn't see my dad anymore. The water was real murky, and I felt my regulator get ripped out of my mouth all of a sudden, and I realized that he'd got washed out of the hole and he was tangled up in my airlines. And I tried to get up out of there, and I was tangled up in my airlines and trying to crawl up to the top, and I went to rip my weight belt off, and I couldn't get the release to come off, and I was clawing to the surface, and I could see it, and had this 80 pounds of lead on my back, and I couldn't get up, and I'm like, I could see the water there, and I'm like, I see the air, and I'm so close. And finally, I was able to get my weight belt off and shoot to the surface, and I looked back, and I could see my dad downstream about 100 yards, and he was flailing, just barely coming up, and he almost drowned that day, and it was scary. You'll have to have him tell you the story sometime. It's pretty exciting from his point of view. Now you can see the gold nicely layered on there. We don't have clear glass anymore. It's looking pretty interesting. Now from there we can start dotting it with clear, which will actually capture layers of gold under the clear dots, and then we'll be able to shrink it down in, and it'll end up with the finished product. I don't know if you can see that at home, but there's one. I'll continue dotting that all the way around. Start to make a pattern of that. I remember our first dredge. It was a tiny little 2.5 incher. The nozzle was only about that big, so I had to throw every rock that was bigger than that out of the hole. I'm sure it's a lot nicer now. Invested in a pretty nice rig. Closer to the size of a coffee can that you can suck up all the rocks. It's nice. We use winches and everything. Is pretty fun. By the time we've been there for a week on the same spot, and I've been winching day after day, I pull up a whole big, almost a pyramid of boulders. I feel like I'm an Egyptian or something, or building Stonehenge. I have all these giant boulders that might come in. We pulled out some that are, I don't know, 6 feet long by 3 feet by 4 feet thick, and I can get enough winches and snatch blocks on there and pull it up. It's amazing to see it come up out of the water. You should see the gold that comes out from some of those huge boulders that some people have never been able to ever move. There's some old chunky gold stuck in the cracks under there. Even if the area's been worked hard before, you can get a lot of gold sometimes just by moving a big boulder, even if you can only move it a few inches. we're starting to get a whole bunch of dots going on this thing here. It's almost ready to start shrinking it down and see what it looks like. Pretty amazing feeling also to be able to take a piece of gold out of the ground that's never been seen by human eyes. And it's all the way down under the gut of the river, maybe 20 feet underwater, and then another 10 feet down under the dirt, all the way down on bedrock. It's never ever been seen, never seen the light of day probably since it was created. Pretty grand feeling. Now we're going to heat this up to shrink it down. Although I'd have to say the scariest thing I've ever experienced while out dredging, I was out sampling this creek once with a small dredge. I was out by myself poking around, and which I realized you should never do. I was dredging in this creek, which is no more than about 18 inches deep in most places, and the bedrock wasn't very far down. It was maybe a foot down below that. And so I didn't even have to have my wetsuit or anything on. I was had my regulator and a snorkel, and it was nice. It was the middle of summer. The water wasn't too horribly cold. The current was pretty fast. I was up in the mountains, and I'm dredging away, and I lost my balance a little bit, and I fell back, and my feet were stuck down in the cracks in the rock. I was wedged in there to resist the current so I could stay and dredge, and pulled me back underwater, and all of a sudden my mask flew off, and I was just clutching my regulator trying to keep it in my mouth so the water didn't rip it out. And I realized that my feet are stuck down in this crack, and I'm laying on my back underwater, and I can see the water right there. And I can almost breathe, and I can't stick my head up out of there because the current's too strong, and I'm struggling to keep my regulator in, and I'm trying to push up to the surface of the water, trying to get up. And I'm realizing, like, I'm going to die here because nobody's around. I'm in the middle of the mountains up this little creek, and I got about, an hour's worth of gas in the dredge motor, and I'm thinking, well, you got an hour's worth of air to live here. You got to lay here and look at the water right there, or you need to spit your regulator out and drown right now. And I'm like, no, I can't go out like that. I kept struggling, and I just kept getting more tired and getting cold because I was under the water now, and I'm not wearing my wetsuit, and I'm just about to give up. I've been under there forever, and I see this hand come down and just rip me up out of the water, grab me, and this guy was